All right, what I want to take a moment to do is to introduce or to show the work that needs to be done to create a section view for our walls. As I mentioned on Friday, that we were going to look at creating the foundation portion. I went over some details with regards to what this foundation should look like, so I'll share those with you, some specific details that what yours should look like. Also then how the first floor or set of floor joists should be placed, and then the walls that we've already done for our rooms, or similarly to what we've done for our rooms, then go up vertically next, and then also some of the sheet materials that close out our walls. So on the outside of this building, we will have one group. Let me get my tool selected. One group, which is a piece of plywood. So that's grouped together, so that way it doesn't stick to anything else. Outside of that, I have another similar sized group. In this case, I have a material applied, so it looks like siding. Same thing on the inside of the house. Here's another piece of plywood or plywood surface that would be applied to the floor. You can see it goes beneath my wall, and then once I have this floor down, my wall goes up from there. So the process that you go through, I want to talk about, and then provide you some additional information or details in the process as well. See if I can grab that dimension and move it where it belongs. All right. So currently I have several layers set up, and you can take a look in the upper right hand corner here, and I'll stretch this out so you can see them all. I have layer 0 where everything usually gets created. I have dimensions, which I have currently turned off, and then I have a few others. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually turn off all except for the very beginning, and that is where you should start with your foundation. There is a footer in the bottom of this foundation. This would actually probably be a trench that's dug for our structure, and in the bottom you have a footer on top of which you have foundation wall that is then going to support everything that exists above the ground. In this case, I'm going to put some details up and zoom in so you can see them. I can tell you the bottom of this footer is 1 foot and 4 inches wide, on top of which I have a it doesn't look like I put that dimension in there. Let me snap that dimension back into place. Whoops. Let me put a dimension here. Then I have an 8-inch foundation wall that extends up. The height of this wall is determined by how cold the weather gets wherever you're building this property. In my case, I made it 3 feet 2 inches tall. That's allowing me to get up to the frost line, and then I'm leaving an additional 8 inches above the soil line. So the goal is to get this footer down below the frost line, which will keep, if this ground never freezes, it'll never push up or down. The house will not settle the way it would if you were to put it up above where the ground freezes. That freeze thaw will cause your building to lift or to fall, and that's not a good thing. So what we have here is our footer detailed out, 8 inches high, solid cement platform on top of which you could put cinder block, or in this case it looks like poured foundation wall that comes up. I'm doing a height of 32 inches, and it's important that we note the red axis, which is currently the soil line or the height of the ground, because we are 8 inches above grade or the soil line. So if I look at this from the original origin, the top of this wall is 8 inches above the dirt, which is a good place to be if you're going to put some topsoil in here. You ideally want to be 6 inches. I'm giving an extra 2 inches of allowance to that construction process. All right. These additional dimensions pertain to the next part. The next part would be our framing. So if I snap some framing in here, you can see that I have 2x material, so it's 1.5 inches thick. In this case, it's a 2x6, which is 5.5 inches wide. And that is sitting in place, on top of which we have our floor joist system. These are 2x8 floor joists. So they're the same thickness, but they're 7.25 inches tall. And that's sitting directly on top of my sill plate, which is what's in contact with the cement, the foundation wall. So I just ran these at a I think I ran them 12 feet long, just to show that I would have a floor over here, and you can see how where the floor would lie. Moving up from there, I'll actually show some sheet materials quickly. I have a 3/4 inch piece of plywood. So this is a 3/4 inch floor system. This is a grouped object, or it should be a grouped object. I'll click on this. 3/4 of an inch thick, covers the entire surface, or the majority of the surface here, so we can see that I would have plywood down, which would raise me another 3/4 of an inch. If I turn that sheet materials off, you can see I then have the very standard wall construction that we've already started with for our bedrooms. This case is a 2x6, so it's 5.5 inches wide, so you could make your 2x6 exterior wall, as this is an exterior wall. And then lastly would be to come back and finish the sheet material, which would be another 3/4 inch layer for plywood on the outside of the building, in addition to whatever you're going to cover that building with, which it could be stucco, it could be siding, it could be a bunch of different cement board, other materials that are weather resistant for the outside of your house. So you're creating these 3/4 inch thick layers. I'm doing 2 of them, one for the outer piece of plywood. Could put insulation board in here as well, but in either case we're trying to create these spaces and materials that we're applying to our structure. Could be a piece of 1-inch insulation board on the outside, which some new construction is now using, but creating those sheets that wrap the outside of the structure. That's really the goal for getting started. I did add one extra interesting detail, and that is if I turn the framing off and the hardware on, I even mounted or showed how we would bolt that sill plate into place. So these are the anchors, the bolt that would hold down that sill plate. This is something we can add later. It's a nice extra detail to show that, yeah, we're going to put anchors in, and these are actually 3 feet apart that would bolt down that sill plate that we can build our walls on top of. You can see how all that stuff is assembled on top. I don't know if you can see them in here. Yep, there's one. So you can see the tops of those bolts are actually in the joist space for that floor system. So each one of those is visible from below. That would be the last part that you'd get to, just adding that extra detail showing how we would fasten that together. Layers are important so you can manage and get through all these steps, in addition to just making sure that the studs are 16 inches apart, 16 on center, and that the materials are grouped so that they're not sticking and we can move and manipulate them. A lot of details that will become a pain in the butt if you're not grouping and or making components when you're assembling, and then also maintaining them in layers.